North Court, in its 2024 West Africa Real Estate Outlook, says though the region's market is a mixed bag, economic recovery and infrastructure drive in cities like Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria and Ghana are pushing a rise in demand for residential and commercial real estate, with Lagos as the top spot for luxury residential development. Ayo Ibaru, Chief Operating Officer and Director of Real Estate Research at North Court, notes implementation of reforms to simplify property registration and transparency of transactions remain key. Take a look.
We looked at the real estate investment attractiveness index that was put together by two researchers, Liza and Grow, in 2011. And what they did was they pretty much went through 66 different real estate markets across various continents of the world as we have them today. And they came up with a number of criteria, pillars we call them, that they used to assess real estate markets, whether they are good enough for attracting investment. Of course, economic activity, political stability, which I'm sure we'll go into in this discussion, the availability of real estate investment opportunities themselves, and just administrative bottlenecks and how various countries deal with that. So in 2023, I mean, West Africa did have a bit of a scare at the midpoint, aside from the various elections that held, notably, of course, Nigeria. We did have the military situation in various countries. We had almost a record number of coups in a limited period of time, and various countries have taken different steps to respond to that. ECOWAS as a region, the African Union as a region, and then the powerhouses being Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, and so on and so forth. They've all taken different positions. Now, most fund managers and pretty much investor-related houses have decided on how they are going to invest in 2024, much of which I think we'll be discussing. So 2023 was one of shocks and turns, but I think at the end of the year, the region did land safely.
Yes. Now, let's talk about some of the country-specific dynamics at play here now. Take, for example, Cote d'Ivoire. This is one of the fastest-growing economies we have in Africa, West Africa as well. But when we have countries like Senegal as well, where an election is expected to happen, there are also concerns around Francophone Africa and the viability, especially with regards to one of the latest news we just heard, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso also exiting the economic communities of West African states bloc. Now, for you, how does this introduce new dynamics into the shift of trends that we should see unpack in the year 2024?
So let's start with the pleasant matters first. Cote d'Ivoire did manage their investor base, and they've been able to leverage the run of form that they've been having, to use soccer terms, seeing that we are currently in the midst of the Africa Cup of Nations. Now, whether they will qualify to the next stage, I'm not entirely sure, but let's keep it as to how their economy and real estate markets are performing. Now, like you rightly said, Cote d'Ivoire's economy has accelerated in recent years, whether it's Freedom House doing an assessment, whether it's the World Bank or even the IMF. The prognosis, immediate and in the near future, as far as their outlook is concerned, is positive. Now, the second thing that they've done properly well is they've been able to allocate the funding that they raised for the hosting of the Africa Cup of Nations, which is over $1 billion, plus investments into infrastructure, of course, visible in the stadia that they built and those that they refurbished. Of course, the roads, the Y4 and the interchanges, those moving at rather fast clip. And then, of course, they've invested in hospitality, real estate investments. And the way they are going, if things are managed properly, I expect much increase as far as 2024 is concerned. Now, just to add, they did go to the market for bonds, and they saw demand of about $8 billion. At the end of the day, they could only accept $2.6 billion in terms of bond raising. And of course, it has sustainability features, which they will put into their economy, which will find its way into real estate markets. Now, what that does is it sends the signal, which of course JP Morgan is carrying now, because that bond will find its way to the JPM Emerging Market Index and so on and so forth. And it means that, while in Nigeria you hear well-intentioned statements, we are open for business, Cote d'Ivoire is actually behaving like they are ready for business. And you can see that in the amounts of money they're able to raise. Now, the counterpoint is the rates at which they are raising this funding is a bit high, it's a bit expensive, but at the end of the day, subsequent costs will be at lower interest rates. That's Cote d'Ivoire. Now, Senegal has the unique advantage of having DFI presence in respectable volumes. For example, the UN House.
The elections are holding next month, though.
Yes, the elections are holding, but I want to believe with the amount of DFI presence and their attendant security operatives and the way the global community responds, especially through their various arms, whether it's the World Bank itself or the IMF or whatever institutions are responsible for raising and moving funding in and around countries. I want to believe the Senegalese government will want to behave itself. I mean, look at what happened in Liberia not too long ago, where George Weah, respectively said, "Look, I've lost this election. I'm going back to my house to go and live my life." So
you think the tension around uncertainty linked to elections might likely douse this year?
I want to believe in Senegal, yes, because again, the character of the country isn't suggestive that we should expect.
So, but wrapping up the conversation now, it's also important when we are looking at the body language of the different governments and now talking about implementation of reforms, property registration, increase in terms of transparency of real estate transactions, and also the appreciation of land prices. Let's talk about that.
So Benin Republic, for example, takes over 120 days to have your land titles registered. And you have a country like Rwanda doing the same thing in about 8 days. So there's quite a bit of work many of the governments in the region need to do to ensure that whether it's the efficiency of land titling or just the recording and so on and so forth is done as at when due. I mean, the Lagos State government has just recently launched its own e-center of sorts for registering land titling and doing your searches and related activity. Now, the hope, of course, is that, as we say here in Nigeria, it's not just audio, in that it actually works well, and we are looking forward to it working well. Now, as far as the land markets are concerned, it is difficult for land markets not to do well, especially in leading cities. So that would be Abidjan, that would be Accra, and that would be, of course, Lagos, Nigeria, and a few other leading cities.
And that was Ayo Ibaru, the Chief Operating Officer and Director of Real Estate Research at North Court.